Rebel religion in the news.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Rebel Religion in the News. I'm your co-host, Jerry O'Lennon, along with Alfredo Romero. He's the pastor of Rock of Life Fellowship, and our guest on Wednesdays is Bishop Peter Hansen from St. Augustine of Canterbury Anglican Church. This is the show where we take the news of the day and see how it points to God. Today we're going to focus on the violence that takes place against religious institutions, churches, and I'm going to kind of turn this over to Alfredo. Real quickly, have you experienced any of this type of thing at your church, at Rock of Life? I don't believe that has happened, or has it?
No, nothing to the extreme, but you can definitely see the division. I've had a few people visit that would talk to me and pretty in a really aggressive way, and we've had a couple of incidences where ushers had to basically have somebody kind of go out into the lobby and foyer where we had to talk to them and calm them down because they came in, we had never seen them before, and they would just be upset about the stance. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it was politically, topics. But I was looking at some numbers, and before I talked to our guest, here's the thing. It's been difficult because if this is from the Family Research Council, they documented more than 430 incidences of violence against churches in 2023, more than double in 2022, an 800% increase. And in 2024, they're expecting that to possibly double. And you see it in the news all the time. And I know our guest, Pastor Hansen has come in and came in from a symposium. So what did you find out?
Well, that is indeed the case. And I've been to some other symposiums that's found the ramping up and more frequency of violence against churches. It's not only church-based shootings, but it can be, like you say, acts of vandalism or arson is actually on the rise against churches. And of course, it's not just against Christianity. We've seen in this past year, since October the 7th, a terrifying rise in anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. And I frankly was caught flat-footed. I just thought, that can't be in America anymore. You got to be kidding. And here it is in all the universities, these big mass demonstrations pro-Hamas and against Israel. And adopting even their slogans, from the river to the sea, drive the Jews out of Israel, calling them an occupying force and all that kind of stuff, which is it's factually untrue, but it is morally reprehensible. And yet this kind of anti-Jewish sentiment can still exist this many years after the Nazi Holocaust. I just can't believe it.
I still can't believe it either. In fact, I want to talk about that in the second segment in particular, because I have some questions for you on that. But you were saying at the symposium, where was it at? And you were telling me, where was it at, first of all?
It was held at a neighborhood church, second year in a row, and it will be held again next year about the same time.
And you said the FBI was there.
The FBI, the Central California Intelligence Center, there was Homeland Security was heading it up, a guy named Jesse Rangel, who's most of them are all ex-law enforcement guys who have gone into this side. They're very sincere. They're government-funded and government-led and absolutely for churches, which is a little refreshing to hear, because we always feel a little pushed back by the government. But here's an instance where they have it for us. They will give you, in your churches, if you're at all curious, you call one of these agencies, they'll come and do an assessment on your property, where the threat exists, where you're poorly covered, where you need a camera, what steps you might take in putting a security team together.
I know of a couple of churches, I know a couple of pastors who actually have members of their church that have sidearms.
Yes.
In the church.
Yes.
And I'm not asking whether you do or not. And you would never answer the question if I did ask the question, because it's just something that is just kept. But I will not mention the churches that have them. But I know a pastor that has a weapon right underneath where he speaks. Mm-hmm. And there's people roaming in the foyer at another church where they have a sidearm. Did the FBI talk? And of course, they're licensed, they're registered, they know how to use these weapons. They're very smart people.
Concealed weapon.
Some of them are former law enforcement agents who actually now are members of that church. So we make that really clear. Is that something that the FBI advised to bring a sidearm and have somebody police themselves in that regard in case somebody pulls out a weapon?
At this event, they didn't talk about those kinds of strategies, but they did talk about, what are you going to do if you're under attack? There's three basic things that the innocent party in a church situation can do. They can run, they can hide, or they can fight. And that's not just a ladder of engagement, but it's an assessment made on the spot. What you have before you. Can you get away? Well, do that. Get away. Don't stop. Run until you feel safe.
And these are strategies that apply to any place, really. Like if you're in, I don't know about you, but I don't know if you remember Master Azad.
Oh yeah,
he's wonderful.
Sure.
And he. He says, and I always felt foolish when I was a younger father and my kids were very young. I'd go into a restaurant, maybe Applebee's or whatever, and I'd always look for the exits, and I'd sit down and I'd always say, "What if?" And my kids would say, "You're acting ridiculous." And actually, Master Fasad always said that's actually exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to sit down, analyze where you're at, what happens if, and then enjoy your meal. And I don't know if more people do that kind of situational awareness before they go into a location. Even when I go into a church, I've gone into your church, I've gone into your church, and I look at the exits and I think, what happens if? Did the FBI talk about that, about being aware of what you should do before it happens?
They will if you get to that kind of a level of analysis, yes. And in fact, they encouraged, we preach about all kinds of things, moral behaviors and things like that. It wouldn't be amiss to have a sermon one Sunday on what are we going to do about the potential of a violent situation here. There are people who have all kinds of opinions all over the map. It's terrible for a Christian to be carrying a gun. To meet violence with violence, we've got to bring him to Jesus. But no, he's going to send you to Jesus. As a matter of fact.
Yeah, I've seen presentations. Where they show a picture of a squashed squirrel. It's the squashed squirrel analogy. Yeah. If you're driving and a squirrel hesitates, isn't sure what to do, it's going to get run over. Yeah, and that's sort of I think what
you
they
don't swerve and get into an accident.
Right, and so it's kind of like don't be the squashed squirrel. When act, don't wait, don't hesitate. A second, 2 seconds could be the difference between life and death.
Yeah, I've gone through quite a few trainings on church security. And matter of fact, our insurance company has a whole training section on it, and we watch videos, and we have our churches secure, and every church should be, every business should be. But a lot of people talk about. I've been watching videos lately about church security, but it's not just that. It's a political motivated reason a lot of times lately against Jews, even against Islam or Christian churches. It's Catholic churches. It's a spiritual battle. We're fighting spiritual forces, and so praying about it and absolutely. And at the same time, part of the church security meetings I've been to mention the fact that Jesus told his disciples when they went out, hey, do you got your blanket? You got your food? You got everything? Do you have your sword? Okay, that ought to be enough. So we are expected to defend ourselves. I mean, if as a parent, as a father, I'm going to defend my family, and I'm going to defend my church family.
I'm glad you mentioned that, the sword. That's the equivalent of a gun today.
Yeah.
That was the weapon of the day, yeah.
Your sword is a Smith & Wesson.
Yeah.
Or a Glock.
Glock 45 millimeter.
Yeah.
One of the things that they said, and I like this guy's talk, was that the person that you're facing here has already resigned himself to the fact he's going to die today.
Yeah.
He is all in. He has nothing held back for safety or security or escape, or he's not worried about the exits. He's going to come in and do what he does. So you got to meet that mentality and not say, "Oh, I can negotiate," or I can talk him down. Yeah, maybe if that's what you got there. But if you got somebody who's coming in as an assailant, someone has to take him down.
Sometimes I when I hear this happens, I think to myself, and I'm not saying I would act this way, because I might be a coward just like anybody else would be if I was posed in that situation. The immediate response, I always think about the gentleman from the Trump assassination attempt,
Yeah.
who covered up his family and took a bullet and died for his family. That'd hopefully be my immediate reaction.
Right.
Because there'd be no better way to lose your life than to do it defending your family and saving their lives. But sometimes I see this happen. I go, gosh, there's 20 kids in this room, and there's one gunman. What if you just took your chairs and said, okay, we're going to charge this guy.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 people die. We don't want anybody to die, but maybe nobody dies.
Right.
But you're going to eventually, at least 18 will be saved for sure, as opposed to having 20 gunned down.
Well, it's like Flight 93. The guys on that flight decided they knew how to counter this thing because they were just knife cutters, and if we get slashed up, all right, we're going to die here.
Did the FBI talk a little bit about that in terms of maybe a unified strategy of attacking the shooter? Did they talk about that?
Yes, strategies and stuff like that we didn't go to. It was mostly programmatic. One of the things that they wanted to promote is after you have an assessment done in your church, you can seek a grant. The federal government is providing through the states a great deal of money. Last year it was 19 million in the state of California. This year it's like 78 million that they're willing to give to proper grants that are applied for adding church safety. And it's for churches specifically. Churches and places of worship.
Pass that information to me. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd like to look into that.
Now you're in downtown Chico, St. Augustine of Canterbury Anglican Church. They're over on Salem Street. Third and Salem. It's downtown. I've been in your church, and we're going to be going to a break really quickly. So unfortunately, you're probably not going to have time to get into this question too much. But I've been in your church, and I've seen. I would say they're probably likely homeless people that will meander in.
Occasionally, yeah.
Yeah, and I get a little nervous.
Yeah.
And I sense that every congregant who's in your church at that time has their eyes focused on that person. Mm-hmm. Do you focus on that person when that person comes in?
Sure. Sure. Of course, my back is to the congregation a lot of times in our form of worship. I'm facing the altar, but if I can look around and see, I do an assessment. I see if we got a peaceful person or somebody who's just drunk or going to do something crazy. I've had a guy come in there and claim to be the Holy Spirit, and he started sort of raging around, but he was just a goofball.
He wasn't the Holy Spirit, though.
No, I think I ascertained that. We chased him off.
Good.
He got away.
Wait, because rejecting the Holy Spirit, now that would be a sin that's unforgivable. Yes.
True.
Okay, we're going to take a break.
I hope I was right.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Rebel religion in the news. Rebel religion in the news.
We're talking about violence in churches, mosques, synagogues, and we're speaking with Bishop Peter Hansen of St. Augustine of Canterbury Anglican Church, and he was at a seminar recently talking about how churches should better protect themselves and be aware of potential violence that comes into the church. He was at the seminar. The FBI was there as well. It was over at the neighborhood church, I guess, on Monday.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. Let's get to the why. And and I know that you focus on this a lot. The anti-Semitism in particular is so disturbing what's happening in this country because, and tell me, and maybe I'm wrong historically, but when the Nazis came into power in the mid-30s, they were kind of welcomed. They thought that they were normal people. They meant no harm. They wanted to make the country of Germany better.
Yeah.
And then they just didn't like Jewish people, and they let it be known. And people just sort of went along with it, kind of the great term, the banality of evil. Mm-hmm. And they just let it happen. And we see this happening with Hamas. Is Hamas the present day Nazi?
Well, they certainly are very Nazi sympathizing. I mean, yeah. I've known, I think that Saddam Hussein admired Hitler, mm-hmm. and so certain of the Islamist extremist positions have taken a very positive view towards Nazism and Hitler, and to say so, they're not afraid to say that. Outrage for us, it's all like a given. You got to know that this was evil, but that's not a given anymore.
See, I don't understand. I guess I have such a hard time understanding why people hate a group of people, the Jewish people. they're good people. They're a democracy in Israel. They're good people. You know, we might not agree with their religious beliefs as Christians, but I don't understand. I don't understand the hatred that's there. I can't figure that out. Is it jealousy, envy? Is that what it is?
I call it envy. You know, the Jews do very well wherever they go. They take care of themselves. God has blessed them with an amazing intelligence and creativity. They get into positions where they influence society. And yeah, some of them are bad players, and you can say, "Oh, this guy is using his power illegitimately." But you can say that about any kind of racial group. It's not a possession of the Jews, and they are by and large fine people. They get into a country and they don't go on welfare. They build hospitals and schools and advance the society. You know.
Well, they're God's chosen people.
Yeah. And
it's a spiritual battle. And Jesus was was Jewish. And so there's that great spiritual battle of persecution of God's people. And it's a huge spiritual battle. Matter of fact, I was reading the FBI states in their data that every year since 1991, especially, Jews were the most frequent victims of religiously motivated hate crimes. It's the Jews, yeah. It's always Jews and Christians, but Jews.
What I don't understand is, for many people, say what you want about Steven Spielberg, the movie Schindler's List really was just an amazing film. It's so I've watched it a couple times. It's so hard to watch, but it's so inspiring and so uplifting, and it's just. But it's amazing that people could watch that film and not say, "Wait a minute, look what we're doing right now." Yeah. How could they? How I don't understand. I have a really hard time connecting these dots. I don't know how to explain.
Movies are always the answer for you, Jerry. But
sometimes it is.
But you're right.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic movie, and it sells the situation perfectly.
I've never seen it.
But even if you watch documentaries, you haven't seen it?
I haven't seen Schindler's List. There's certain movies I can't watch.
See, now that reminds me of a Seinfeld episode.
No,
you mean you haven't seen Schindler's List?
No,
Jerry,
no way.
You got to see Schindler's List.
See if you can catch the trend here. I can't see Schindler's List. I can't see Private Benjamin.
Private Ryan.
Private Ryan. That's the other one, Goldie Hawn. Private Ryan. I can't see The Notebook, or I can't. My spirit. I can't handle that extreme sadness. I'd rather watch a documentary than some type of a movie about it. Fair enough. I can't do it. It breaks me up.
Yeah, there once in a while a movie actually captures what actually happened, and I think probably Saving Private Ryan might have been one of those.
Yeah.
And I think Schindler's List might be one of the others.
I can't do it.
The rest is just drama and made up stuff.
Titanic, all that. I can't handle the emotions of it.
Wow. But you could handle the emotions of a documentary? That's even harder.
I can watch the documentaries. I just can't see the portrayal because of the music and the drama and the acting, and
pull on your heart.
It pulls on my heart, and I just can't. Yeah. My heart's real sensitive.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you don't need to be convinced that the Jews are precious.
No, I don't. I support absolutely God's people. Absolutely.
Is it important to see for young people to see not the movie Schindler's List or Private Ryan, but to be taught what happened during, for instance, the Holocaust?
Well, I think General Eisenhower, at the time the future president, was taking as much video footage of the concentration camps that he'd gone into, and they were liberating the people out of there, and they got all the people laid like cordwood and dead, and all the evidence of the death that was going on here. He said, take the best evidence we can, because there's going to come a time when people are going to say it didn't happen.
Yeah.
We got to know that this was true.
Mm-hmm.
And people, they're saying it didn't happen, the deniers.
Right.
There's even a movie called Denial that's about denying the Holocaust.
Right.
And there are many people who voice that opinion today. It didn't happen. It was all manufactured.
I know I've mentioned this before, but I was really inspired by, she was a philosopher and a reporter, Hannah Arendt. She was a philosopher, and she came up with the term the banality of evil. And she was covering the trial of Adolf Eichmann. And she came out of it saying, this guy's not evil, he's just an idiot. I mean, he's just an idiot. He just followed along because he thought this was what the government wanted to do. And so he said, well, this is, if I do this and we bring in so many people and I do this, then I'll get promoted, and this is the way the government works. And so a lot of people were upset because she said, that they weren't evil, that they were just stupid. They were just
Ignorant.
and just turned a blind eye toward what was happening because they thought this is what they were supposed to do. It was so interesting because sometimes I look at what's going on in the United States and I see these protests of Hamas supporters and I think these people are just stupid. They don't. It's not that they're necessarily evil, but they don't know what they're doing. They're just dumb.
Yeah, well, there's sloppy thinking, you know.
Maybe that's it.
To equivalize Hamas and Palestinians, you know, whatever that is, because it's really kind of a funny amorphous definition of that. But okay, the Arab-related populations of the Near East. So, okay, so you're saying Hamas means them. No, it doesn't. It's a government. And their head guy, who was hiding out in Qatar, was just killed in Iran. But he was running this dictatorial situation, not letting the people get away for their safety. I mean, he's a monster, and their regime thinks monstrous things and enacts them. They're at constant war, total war against Israel, and so that's not nice.
But what's happening here is back in Nazi Germany, we didn't have, until you say Eisenhower came in and took all the film, we didn't have the video and the evidence showing what was happening to the Jews at that time. People didn't really see it until after the whole Holocaust, until after World War II was finished. That's when people were exposed to what Germany was doing, what the Nazis were doing. Here we have, you know, we're living in real time. We're seeing people being persecuted because they're Jews or Christians or whatever it is. And yet it seems like there's a large part of our population who just says, oh, well, it's not me or my family, so what do I care? It almost seems to be that attitude.
Can I read a Bible verse?
Sure.
Ephesians 6:12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. These are spiritually motivated evil actions. You know, they're driven by demonic forces. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
Well,
I would say also, you know, you mentioned they're not evil; they're just stupid.
Some are.
There is something about being factually stupid or unable to reason through a thing. There's a thing called moral stupidity. Being purposely stupid about what's right and wrong.
Okay.
You can get right to, you know, a child can do this, can figure out what's right and what's wrong.
Sure.
It doesn't take a master's degree in anything. You know the right and wrong. You don't put a bunch of people in a shower and turn on gas and then clean up the bodies and say that's what the government told me to do, and I'm morally neutral on this. I just did my job. No, excuse me. Right and wrong. You know this. You know.
That always brings up
the churches turned up the organ music so they didn't hear the screaming. Next door of the. I mean, there's a real story in Germany about that. Play it louder, so we don't hear the screaming of the people in the trains going into Auschwitz.
And I know I mentioned this before. And again, it always comes down to a movie. Zone of Interest is a wonderful film about the Adolf Hess, who actually his family lived in a house, beautiful home. Literally, there was a butt right next door to Auschwitz.
Wow.
And they would hear the screaming, they would see the smoke, and they just went about their lives.
Yeah.
Is that a new movie that just came out recently?
It came out a year ago.
Yeah.
It's in subtitles. It's called Zone of Interest.
Right, I saw
It's an interesting movie because, well, it's just interesting because you think, how could somebody not hear those screams and the gunshots and still say, oh, let's go out for a picnic. Oh, here's a birthday party for little Billy or whatever.
Yeah.
And they just let it happen. And we're kind of doing the same thing now in our society with what's going on in the Middle East. It's frightening in a way.
You remember in Schindler's List, the commandant was just arbitrarily shooting people in the yard, and Schindler saw that and had his conscience pricked over it. He said, just why don't you forgive them once in a while? Why don't you?
Yep.
You had the power of life and death.
Mercy.
Give them life. Give them mercy.
Amon Goeth, yes.
And he played at that for a while until he got bored and then he went back to shooting.
Back to shooting people indiscriminately. Well, I wish we could solve this problem. I want to thank Bishop Peter
Get
Hansen.
safe and make yourselves safe for church.
Jesus is the answer.
It is.
the answer.
Bishop Peter Hansen, St. Augustine of Canterbury Anglican Church. 9 a.m. service time. If you're watching the podcast, you can see the time right there on your screen. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. We're out of time. So long.
Thank you.